Once again, welcome back to Obstetrics and Gynecology videos. Today we are going to see about cardiac diseases in pregnancy. First, let us see the normal cardiac physiology. During the antenatal period, cardiac output will increase, especially in the first trimester itself, and it will continue to rise and it will reach the maximum between 28 to 34 weeks of gestation. And this cardiac output increase is due to the rise in the plasma volume, hormonal influences, and due to the effect of or influence of autonomic nervous system. And the blood volume also will increase, and the volume increase is by the plasma volume expansion and red blood cell multiplication. The mean plasma volume increases is 50% over the pregnant volume, and the red cell multiplication is in proportion to the volume of expansion if nutritional requirements are met adequately. Increased volume maintains a dilated systemic vasculature also. And now let us see the hormonal influences. Increased estrogen leads to the systemic vasodilation, and vasodilation increases the cardiac output because of lowered peripheral resistance. Prolactin increases the myocardial contractility also. So these two things leads to the increased cardiac output. And now let us see what is happening to the autonomic nervous system. When the autonomic nervous system is activated or blocked, dramatic changes in the maternal blood pressure can result. The cardiovascular system is hyperfilled from increased blood volume and hyperdynamic because of the predominance of the autonomic nervous system. And about the venous pressure, increased venous pressure will be there, especially in the lower extremities, and this leads to the normal finding of accentuated jugular pulse. And if you are looking into the heart, it will be slightly enlarged, and sometimes it occurs in pregnancy because of the upward and leftward automatic displacement of the heart. And because of this, benign dysarrhythmias can occur, presumably because of the normal influences on myocardial activity. That is, when the size of the uterus is increasing, the gravid uterus will push the heart upward and slightly leftward, and that is the reason for the displacement of the heart, and that may lead to the dysarrhythmias. During the pregnancy, especially when the mother is lying in the supine position, the gravid uterus will compress the inferior vena cava, and that leads to the partial or total occlusion of the inferior vena cava, and that leads to decreased blood volume which is coming to the heart. And when the amount of blood which is coming to the heart is decreasing, the cardiac output also will decrease. And during the intrapartum period, we know that the uterus will be contracting and the blood from the uterus will get squeezed into the circulation, and the uterine contractions normally increase the cardiac output between 20 to 30%, and the stroke volume also because of increased intravascular volume, which leads to increased workload of the heart. During the contraction, an additional 300 to 500 ml of blood will be forced in out of the uterus, and it will enter into the maternal circulation, and that is the reason for this increased cardiac output and increased stroke volume. The workload can be relieved by positioning the patient laterally and by administering pain relief, especially with epidural anesthesia. And in the postpartum period also, there is a high risk for fluid volume overload caused by remobilization of fluid into the vascular compartments. Now let us see the summary of the changes that we have discussed, that we have seen in the previous slides. Increased cardiac output by 40% will occur, and increase in the stroke volume will occur by 10%, and the heart rate will increase by 10 to 15 beats per minute, and the blood volume also will increase by 40%, and peripheral resistance will decrease, and diastolic pressure also will decrease. So these are the major changes that are occurring during the pregnancy in the cardiovascular system. And now we can see the additional factors responsible for the deterioration of function of the damaged heart. Already, if the lady is having some cardiac problem, along with that, when the lady is becoming pregnant, we have seen that certain changes occur in the cardiovascular system, and these two things may contributes to the problems already, and along with that, these risk factors also may produce the problems. One is advancing age of the mother, second thing is left ventricular hypertrophy, and appearance of risk factors such as infection, anemia, preeclampsia, excessive weight gain, and multiple pregnancies, which further increase the cardiac outload. History of previous heart failure, inadequate supervision. Now, let us see the functional classification of heart diseases by New York Heart Association. In the class 1, limitation of activities will not be there, and there won't be any symptoms from ordinary activities. And in class 2, slight or mild limitation of activity will be there, and the person will become comfortable with rest or with mild exertion. More than ordinary physical activity results in fatigue, palpitation, dyspnea, or anginal pain. And class 3 is marked by limitation of physical activity, and the person will become comfortable only at rest. Less than ordinary physical activity causes fatigue, palpitation, dyspnea, or anginal pain. And class 4 is confined to bed or chair. Even with mild physical activity or any form of physical activity will produce discomfort and symptoms. And if any physical activity is undertaken, discomfort will increase. And the incidence of cardiac diseases is 1% of pregnancies. Now we can see the causes. Rheumatic heart diseases, that is the reason for the 75% of the problem. Mitral valve affection is the commonest, followed by aortic valve, then both others. And the problem is congenital heart diseases. It accounts for the 10% of the cardiac diseases during pregnancy. This includes acyanotic, that is left to right shunt, and more common, it includes septal defects and perinductus arteriosus. And another one is cyanotic heart diseases, that is right to left shunt. Example, tetralogy of Fallot, Eisenmenger syndrome, which is more dangerous and carries maternal mortality rate exceeding 25%. Other include 5%, that is by the ischemic heart diseases, arrhythmias, and other cardiomyopathy. Now let us see the types of heart diseases. First one is congenital heart diseases. It includes atrial septal defect, ventricular septal defect, perinductus arteriosus, tetralogy of Fallot, Eisenmenger syndrome, and coarctation of aorta. And next is rheumatic heart diseases. This includes mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation, double mitral disease, aortic stenosis, and aortic regurgitation. And other rare forms include cardiomyopathy, hypertensive heart diseases, myocardial ischemia, or coronary artery diseases. So first let us see about the acyanotic congenital heart diseases. It includes the ASD, that is atrial septal defect. After the bicuspid or aortic valve, which is commoner in males actually, the second term or ASD is the commonest congenital cardiac defects in adults. Arrhythmias do not usually develop until the middle age. Here in the picture you can see the atrial septal defect. And in ASD, no problems are anticipated during the pregnancy, but acute blood loss is poorly tolerated. That is, if the bleeding is occurring, it will be poorly tolerated by the mother, and it can cause massive increase in left to right shunting and precipitous to fall in left ventricular output, blood pressure, coronary blood flow, and even that may lead to the cardiac arrest also. Next is atrioventricular defect. So this picture also shows the atrioventricular defect. In atrioventricular defect, these are usually associated with the regurgitation through the atrioventricular valves. They frequently cause heart failure in infancy and require early surgery. Pulmonary hypertension is more frequent if there is significant mitral regurgitation, and residual mitral regurgitation or paced cardiac rhythm may follow previous surgical treatment. Next is ventricular septal defect and patent ductus arteriosus. These defects, which increase the volume load of left ventricle, are well tolerated in pregnancy unless the defects are large and complicated by pulmonary vascular diseases. Next, pulmonary stenosis does not usually give rise to symptoms during the pregnancy. Another cyanotic congenital heart disease is aortic stenosis. Aortic stenosis causes problems during the pregnancy, and it is least and common is aortic valve stenosis. If symptoms are absent, the ECG is normal, and an exercise test is well performed, pregnancy will be usually accomplished without trouble. Next, cyanotic heart disease, we can see aortic stenosis, that is achievement of the target heart rate with a normal rise of blood pressure without the development of ST or T wave changes can be taken as an indication that pregnancy will be safe. It should, if possible, be carried out before advising about pregnancy. Echocardiography will show good left ventricular function. The Doppler transaortic valve velocity will rise during pregnancy if the stroke volume increases in abnormal fashion. Any patient who develops angina, dyspnea, or resting tachycardia should be admitted to hospital for rest. Administration of beta adrenergic blocking drugs will increase diastolic coronary flow time and left ventricular filling with the resultant improvement in angina and left ventricular function. If despite these measures angina, pulmonary congestion and left ventricular failure persist or progress, balloon aortic valvotomy to be considered. If surgery is needed, the fetus should be delivered by cesarean section under the general anesthesia before the valve replacement. Delivery will be followed by immediate improvement in the mother and in operating conditions for the surgeon. If aortic valve replacement is carried out during the pregnancy, on account of the mother's poor condition, the fetus is likely to die either during induction or during cardiopulmonary bypass. The next cyanotic congenital heart disease is coarctation of the aorta. Aortic coarctation may first be diagnosed during pregnancy and should always be excluded when raised blood pressure is recorded at booking. Although the blood pressure can be lowered, adequate control cannot be maintained during exercise, which brings the risk of cerebral hemorrhage and aortic dissection. The patient should therefore be advised to rest and avoid exertion. Surgery can be carried out during pregnancy as cross-clamping of the aorta does not affect lower segment blood flow, but the risk of local complication of the aorta is increased. The risk of dissection is increased in patients with pre-existing aortic abnormality associated with coarctation, Marfan syndrome, or other inherited disorders of connective tissue. Normal delivery with an accelerated second stage should be planned unless anticipated obstetric problems suggest that cesarean section would be preferable. Fetal growth is normal and pre-eclamptic toxemia is also rare. Next cyanotic congenital heart disease is Epstein anomaly. In Epstein anomaly, the tricuspid valve have ventricular displacement of the septal or posterior leaflets of the tricuspid valve together with a sail-like anterior leaflet. There is usually an associated arterial communication also. Cyanosis may develop and lead to poor fetal growth, but if acyanotic, they usually do well in pregnancy. Next cyanotic congenital heart disease is tetralogy of Fallot. The association of severe right ventricular outflow tract obstruction with a large subaortic ventricular septal defect and overriding of aorta causes right ventricular hypertrophy and right to left shunting with cyanosis. Pregnancy is tolerated well, but fetal growth is poor with a high rate of miscarriage, prematurity, and small for date babies. The hematocrit tend to rise during pregnancy in cyanosed women. The atrial saturation falls markedly on effort, so rest is prescribed to optimize the fetal growth, but subcutaneous heparin should be given to prevent venous thrombosis and paradoxical embolism. Women who have had a previous surgical correction of the tetralogy will do well in pregnancy. And next cyanotic congenital heart disease is Eisenmenger syndrome. Pregnancy is women with pulmonary hypertension associated with reversed cerebral shunt carries high risk. In women with ventricular septal defect, that is Eisenmenger complex, it may be as high as 50%. Sterilization should be advised or abortion followed by the sterilization. Women with pulmonary hypertension who still have predominant left to right shunt are at lesser risk and may do well in pregnancy. If a woman with Eisenmenger syndrome insists on continuing her pregnancy, she should rest as much as possible and be admitted to hospital by the end of the second trimester or as soon as the resting arterial saturation starts to fall. She should then be kept in hospital with continuous pulse oximetry and 60% oxygen by nasal cannulae, and prophylactic subcutaneous heparin also should be given. Fetal growth should be carefully monitored and the baby delivered as soon as growth slows or stops. Cesarean section under general anesthesia is preferred in order to avoid the exertion of normal labor. Epidural analgesia or anesthesia causes systemic vasodilatation and a fall in arterial saturation even with maximal hydration. Oximetry, subcutaneous heparin, and passive physiotherapy should be continued and mobilization should proceed only slowly. Nebulized prostacyclin can be used to try to prevent pulmonary vasoconstriction. When sudden death occurs, resuscitation is rarely successful and no additional cause is found at autopsy. Usually there is a chance for sudden death in the postpartum period. Death is usually preceded by vagal slowing, a fall in blood pressure and oxygen saturation followed by ventricular fibrillation. And next cyanotic congenital heart disease is pulmonary hypertension or primary pulmonary hypertension. It causes great loss of cardiac respiratory reserve. The right ventricle may be unable to increase its stock output and tachycardia leads to right ventricular ischemia and failure. Dyspnea may increase to a crippling level and the pulmonary vascular disease may progress. Postpartum hemorrhage may occur in as many as 14% of women with systemic lupus erythematosus. So exclusion of this should be a routine part of the assessment of fitness for pregnancy of such women. Pulmonary embolism may cause dyspnea of recent onset, but in postpartum hemorrhage, an ECG will show right ventricular hypertrophy and echocardiography is immediately diagnostic. Next cyanotic congenital heart disease is mitral stenosis. It remains most common potential lethal pre-existing heart condition in pregnancy. Dyspnea may have been absent or unremarked on before the pregnancy. It may be missed during routine antenatal examination because the mama is diastolic and submammary. The first indication of trouble is sinus tachycardia at rest. The anxiety caused by the dyspnea increases the tachycardia and exacerbates the problem. The mitral stenosis may previously not have been recognized, and should pulmonary congestion or edema develop in any pregnant woman, chest radiograph and echocardiography are mandatory. Patients with mitral stenosis complicated by pulmonary hypertension are less vulnerable to the development of pulmonary edema but tend to develop congestive heart failure. The ECG shows left atrial P waves and right axis deviation. The chest X-ray shows a small heart but with the prominence of the left atrial appendage with left atrium and pulmonary congestion or edema. Oxygen should be given and the heart rate slowed by relief of anxiety with a sedative or opiate. 20 mg of intravenous furosemide administered and metoprolol 50 to or 100 grams as necessary to secure and maintain the heart rate of under 90 beats per minute. Most of the young women have mitral valves which are suitable for balloon valvotomy, and this should be carried out after the patient's condition has improved. If necessary, she can safely be moved to a hospital with major cardiac facilities if the mitral valve is unsuitable. A beta blocking drug can be used throughout the pregnancy. Digoxin should only be used if atrial fibrillation occurs, as it does not slow the heart in sinus rhythm. If an open operation on the mitral valve is going to be required, this should be deferred until after delivery. Epidural analgesia or anesthesia is suitable for the patient with mitral stenosis, provided it is not complicated by severe pulmonary hypertension and right ventricular failure. Individual assessment of the severity of mitral or aortic valve obstruction determines the likely tolerance of pregnancy. Rheumatic aortic stenosis is always associated with mitral stenosis and sometimes also with tricuspid valve involvement. Atrial fibrillation may develop at a young age in patients with multi-valve disease, and if this occurs during pregnancy, cardioversion should be carried out. Floppy mitral valve may be sporadic or inherited as a dominant condition in some families with variants of Marfan syndrome. And in this case, the pregnancy will be well tolerated. Next, cyanotic congenital heart disease is Marfan syndrome. The treatment of women with Marfan syndrome who already have aortic root widening but desire children remains very difficult, both with regard to mother's safety and in relation to the dominant inheritance of the condition. Most of such patients should not undertake pregnancy until after aortic root replacement with resuspension of the aortic valve, particularly if there is a family history of aortic dissection or rupture. All patients with Marfan syndrome should be treated with a beta blocking drug throughout the pregnancy. Despite of this, many women with Marfan syndrome go through the pregnancy without complication. A benign family history together with echo evidence of a normal aortic root is encouraging predictors of a successful outcome for women with Marfan syndrome. The next cyanotic congenital heart disease is infective endocarditis. Infective endocarditis, it is rare in pregnancy, but it threatens the life of both mother and child. And the treatment is essential, the same as outside pregnancy with emergency valve replacement if indicated. The baby should be delivered if viable before the maternal operation. Antibiotic prophylaxis is discretionary for normal deliveries in women with congenital or valve disease, but should be given in women with artificial heart valves or a history of endocarditis if it is there. The next cyanotic congenital heart disease is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's an autosomal dominant disease characterized by hypertrophy of the undilated left and sometimes also the right ventricle. And sometimes it may first get diagnosed during the pregnancy, and if a systolic murmur, if it is there, that may lead to the undertaking of ECG or echocardiography, and we may diagnose the condition. Most of the patients are asymptomatic, and patients with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy respond well to pregnancy by useful increase in their normal reduced left ventricular cavity size and stroke volume. In severe cases, the left atrial pressure may rise, particularly if sinus tachycardia develops. Symptoms of shortness of breath, chest pain, dizziness, or syncope indicates a need for a beta blocking drug. Ventricular arrhythmias can occur in patients, and it's common in the young ladies. And sudden death has only very rarely been reported during the pregnancy. It is most important in all patients to avoid vasodilation during labor and delivery or postpartum blood loss. Cesarean section is required for the rare hemodynamically compromised patients with a high left atrial pressure or for obstetric reasons. It is the most unusual to find hypertrophy in the infants of mothers with the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Next cyanotic congenital heart disease is peripartum cardiomyopathy. It is usually defined as heart failure occurring within a month or before 6 months after the childbirth in women who had not previously been known to have heart disease. And it's a cause of 5% of the cardiac death that occurs in relation to pregnancy. Peripartum cardiomyopathy does not differ clinically from dilated cardiomyopathy except in its temperamental relation to the pregnancy. If endomyocardial biopsy is carried out within a month of the onset, it usually shows changes of myocarditis, unlike acute myocarditis occurring outside pregnancy. Survivors of the acute illness tend to improve. The severity varies from catastrophic to subclinical when it may be discovered only fortuitously through echocardiography. In the worst scenario, fulminating pulmonary edema and congestive heart failure develops with dyspnea, orthopnea, tachycardia, hypotension, and fluid overload. The patient has a third heart sound, gallop, and sometimes a mitral regurgitant murmur also will be there. Systemic embolism from mural thrombus may herald the on-ventricular arrhythmias or precede the development of clinical heart failure, and pulmonary embolism may further complicate the clinical picture. The ECG shows sinus tachycardia, supraventricular and ventricular ectopic beats or sustained tachycardia. The QRS complex may be normal. Low voltage or show a conduction defect or changes may be focal and suggestive of myocardial infarction. The chest X-ray shows an enlarged heart with pulmonary congestion or edema, and often bilateral pleural effusions also can be seen. Echocardiography shows dilatation, which usually involves all four chambers. A small pericardial effusion is often present. Doppler ultrasound shows mitral, tricuspid, and pulmonary regurgitation through structurally normal valves. Peripartum cardiomyopathy is more frequent in women with multiple pregnancies, probably because of the greater hemodynamic burden. And it's common in women with pre-existing structural heart disease, probably because of a reduced cardiovascular reserve, which allows what would have been subclinical to become overt. This could also explain an alleged association with preeclamptic toxemia. There is no convincing evidence that the disorder is more commonly in socially deprived, multiparous, older, or black mothers. The basis for the disease seems to be immunological. Evidence of an infective viral origin is rarely found. A family history of dilated cardiomyopathy is obtained, and it may be that pregnancy is a trigger for the development of immunologically based myocarditis and heart failure in a generally predisposed individual at a hemodynamically vulnerable time. Next is coronary artery disease. Coronary arthroma is rare in young women except in association with familial hypercholesterolemia, but angina occasionally develops in older women who have delayed pregnancy, especially in association with hypertension, smoking, and diabetes, and is also exacerbated during the pregnancy. When myocardial infarction occurs in pregnancy, it usually develops without preceding angina because the underlying cause is not usually atherosclerotic. Spontaneous coronary artery dissection is the commonest cause, and sudden severe chest pain is the usual manifestation. And in late pregnancy or in peripartum, the myocardial infarction has been attributed to the administration of oxytocic agents. Next is pulmonary embolism. Untreated pulmonary embolism in pregnancy is the reason for the high mortality. Sometimes the diagnosis may get missed and it may occur unexpectedly during pregnancy, but more often it will occur in the postpartum period, and particularly in women treated by bed rest because of preeclampsia or following the cesarean delivery. The incidence continues to be higher up to the 6 weeks after the delivery. Inherited resistance to the activated protein C is found in as many as 20% of women who develop pulmonary embolism in pregnancy or while taking oral contraceptives. Next, we can see the pathophysiology of the heart diseases. The stroke volume is the amount of blood ejected with each contraction of the left ventricle. It is affected by four interrelated factors, that is diastolic filling pressure, distensibility of the ventricle, myocardial contractibility, aortic pressure. It is the amount of pressure the ventricle must overcome to push blood into the aorta. And there is a direct relationship between the diastolic volume and the amount of blood pumped during the systole. The greater the diastolic filling pressure, the more the fibers of the left ventricle stretch during the diastole and the harder they contract during systole, increasing stroke volume and cardiac output. However, the muscle fibers are stretched beyond a certain point, they lose their distensibility. This loss decreases the force of contraction and therefore decreases the cardiac output also. And preload is the force responsible for stretching the ventricular muscles. It is also called diastolic filling pressure. If the preload is low, the ventricular muscle will not stretch enough for effective contractility. This leads to decreased stroke volume. If preload is too high, the muscle fibers will be overstretched. This also results in decreased contractility, leading to decreased stroke volume. And afterload is the amount of pressure or resistance in the aorta to the emptying of the left ventricle. If the volume in the left ventricle at the end of diastole and is also called systemic vascular resistance. Systemic vascular resistance is measured by taking blood pressure readings. If the afterload is higher, the greater the force required by the left ventricle to overcome the aortic pressure with the systolic pressure to force the aortic valve to open. A high afterload decreases the stroke volume and cardiac output if the pressure cannot be effectively overcome. The right heart failure may result from persisting high afterload. Now we can see the general signs and symptoms. Dyspnea, severe enough to limit the usual activity. Progressive orthopnea, paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea, syncope during or immediately following exertion, chest pain associated with the activity. These are the common features you can see in all these conditions. At the diagnostic testing, diagnosis of cardiac disease is made by the presentation of symptoms, electrocardiogram, echocardiogram, and a series of laboratory tests which includes the cardiac enzymes, electrolytes, and chest radiograph. When the pregnant woman is giving an anticoagulant therapy, coagulation studies are done. If the woman is taking digitalis, therapeutic blood levels also should be measured. Next, we can see the management. In pre-pregnancy, the obstetrician and cardiologist, they should discuss together and they should discuss about the maternal and the fetal risk, and they should discuss about the safe and effective contraception for the ladies, and they should evaluate the current cardiac status of the lady, and as far as possible maximum amount of medical and surgical treatment should be given before the pregnancy, and advise against pregnancy if there are conditions which are complicating the pregnancy. And in the prenatal period, assess the functional class of heart disease, and if the condition is getting worsened or if it is producing problem for the health of the mother or for the health of the baby, termination is an option. And optimize the medical management, avoid or minimize the activating factors, anticoagulant for certain conditions, discuss the risk and benefits of continuation of warfarin therapy and versus changing to subcutaneous heparin. And we have to discuss about the anesthesiology, antibiotics in certain conditions. We have to see the fetal surveillance. We have to monitor the growth of the fetus and detailed fetal cardiac ultrasonography if the patient has congenital heart disease. In the case of endocarditis and in the case of infective conditions, antibiotics can be given. Avoid mental and physical stress, and always we can think about the epidural analgesia. And labor in the left lateral or upright position should be given in order to reduce stress on the heart, and monitor electromagnetic, more invasive monitoring is needed with certain conditions. Full resuscitation facilities should be available in the labor unit. Provide continuous fetal heart rate monitoring. Assess the second stage and the progress of the labor. And we should avoid the ergometry in the third stage. Now we can see the drugs that we are using during the pregnancy for the treatment of the cardiac diseases. We can use heparin, furosemide, digitalis, tocolytics, beta blockers, quinidine, disopyramide, phosphate. So these drugs we can use safely depending on the condition of the mother. So these are the main cardiac diseases that are affecting the pregnancy, and we have seen the outcome of pregnancy in such cardiac diseases. So thank you for watching this video. See you soon with a new video.